Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
I want to first thank Rabbi and Cantor for their part in making this happen. And I want to thank my family and friends as well as both this and my recovery community for sharing and helping me mark this milestone in the continuation of my spiritual journey. You know, I really thought I'd be able to separate this experience from my recovery from drugs and alcohol. In fact, I made every effort to do so. A number of sleepless nights were spent in contemplation. But I finally came to the realization that I just couldn't do it, largely because alcohol and drugs were one of my most impenetrable prisons. In the end, I couldn't ignore the parallel between recovery and the spiritual journey from slavery, of which Yeshiva has been no small part. Our Torah portion speaks of a journey from Egypt or Mitzrayim, the narrow place, to freedom from slavery. As I approached the age of 13, I remember having a conversation with my mom. She gave me a choice, bar mitzvah or a year of religious school at the temple. Well, there was no way this shy, introverted kid was stepping up to the Bnai. This self-driven, restrictive fear was emblematic of my own personal aging. There was a year of temple religious school, but no bar mitzvah. So here I am, 50 years later, but better late than never. It wasn't too much later that a long experiment with drugs and alcohol began. After 20 years of torturing myself and those around me, I finally admitted that I had been a failure. I became willing to do something someone else's way, and thus began my experience with recovery and a different spiritual journey. With 6 months of sobriety, I found myself on a weekend men's retreat. We studied the big book all day long. I've always been a habitual reader at bedtime, and having had my fill of the big book that day, I noticed the only other book in my room was a Bible. All the familiar childhood Bible stories flashed before me, but I wondered to myself, what does this book actually say? I started reading at page 1. Returning home, I retrieved the Chumash given to me by my mom and continued reading. I've been plodding through that and the other books of the Hebrew Bible ever since. As I have found spiritual concepts in God always personally challenging, interest in my Judaism began to kindle more brightly. Believing that anything that forces me to think about God would be a benefit, I started going to Friday night services around town with my friend. One Friday he called me and said, "We're going to BTS Yeshiva tonight. It starts at 6:30. Here's the address. Meet us there." That first Shabbos, it spoke to me immediately. Another friend of mine had interest and we attended weekly. When my friend suddenly stopped attending, I was faced with a decision. How important is this? Is it worth the discomfort of coming alone, not knowing anyone, and forcing myself to meet new people? These were some of my weakest areas. Remembering my fears and difficulties, I decided that if all I got from Shabbos services was an extra 2 hours of God a week, it would be well worth it. It was one of the best decisions I've made. That was around 10 years ago, and look at me now. I stand before you having received infinitely more than 2 hours of God a week. Community, love, friendship, and peer pressure have pushed me forward. This continuing journey has allowed me to poke my head beyond my personal Mitzrayim and reach the spiritual signpost. God and community have elevated my soul.
The other Terry, whose quiet, unassuming nature actually hides such wisdom and care and thoughtfulness. On a very personal level, I know that we've bonded over the course of the year over our shared love of history and getting to the sort of the root of why things are the way that they are. And it's clear that from your Dvar Torah, your Drash, why you are the way that you are. And thank you for sharing that with all of us and sharing a piece of yourself.
Yeah.